Hello, today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2015, and I am your host, Sue Brown, and welcome to Info2Rail, your freight train to modern media. How are you all doing today, this beautiful Wednesday that God gave us? I can tell you right now, I'm in New York, and it is cold, so somebody out there forgot to turn up the heat. I want to welcome you all to our show, and we have a great show for you today. We're very fortunate to have UFO and paranormal pioneer Timothy Green Beckley with us today. First, I want to share with you a few missing persons cases. And I can't express enough to you how important it is to me that we band together and we find these missing people, and hopefully we can get them back home safely. I think about it. What if that was my children, my mom, my dad, my husband? What if that was my family missing? I'd want people to look and be aware. I would want everybody to be alert and see what's going on around us, and bring these missing people home. The first one I have for you is Olivia Fries, age 16. She was last seen in Bowling Green, Kentucky, in the 1700 block of Great House Road, on April 19th, 2015. She's believed to be in danger due to a medical condition. She's 5 foot 5 inches tall. She weighs 120 pounds. She has collar-length auburn hair and blue eyes. Fries was last seen wearing a black hoodie-style sweatshirt and black combat-style boots. Fries is a student at Greenwood High School. Anyone with any information on her location, please contact the Warren County Sheriff's Office at 270-842-1633 or call your local 911. The second one I have for you is Brooke Gray. She was last seen in Plaquemines Parish, and she's from Belle Chase. She was walking to sleep at a friend's house, and she has not been seen since. Please, if you have any information, contact the Plaquemines Parish Sheriff's Office at 504-564-2525 or call your local 911. She is 16 years old. Come on, guys. That could be any of our children. I just can't express it enough to you. When the whole Kellyanne Polton incident happened, that was very close to home. That was East Rochester, and that was devastating. And you know what? I was pregnant with my first daughter, and I was still out there looking. I was checking every car that went by. I was checking every railroad track from here to there. I mean, I can't tell you how important this is to me. If you go on our site, our Info2Rail Google site, I post pictures of everyone that I talk about each week. So if you go on there, you can take a look at these missing people, and maybe we can bring some home safely. And if not, at least we can bring peace to the families that are missing their children. We're going to go to a short break right now, and when we return, we're going to have Timothy Green Beckley with us. Stay tuned. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back with Timothy Green Beckley. Tim is a UFO and paranormal pioneer. Since an early age, his life has been more or less revolved around the paranormal. The house he was raised in was thought to be haunted. He underwent out-of-body experiences at age 6, and he saw his first of 3 UFOs when he was only 10 years old. Over the years, he has written over 30 books on everything from rock music to the secret MJ-12 papers. Today, he's the president of Inner Light Global Communications and editor of the Conspiracy Journal and Bazaar. All right, welcome to Info2Rail, Tim, and thank you so much for being on our show today.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Where are you, by the way?
I am in Canandaigua, New York. I am right on the Finger Lakes, Canandaigua Finger Lakes.
Well, actually, we're actually not that far away. Do you have any sea serpents, sea monsters up there, lake monsters?
I'm thinking there's probably a few. I just haven't seen them yet.
I've always wanted to do an expedition to Lake Champlain to look for champ. You know, I've been to Loch Ness over in Dummadocket, Scotland, which is quite a trip. It's like one of the most beautiful countrysides. You take the train from London and get off at Inverness, and then you can take the bus up to the loch. You know, in fact, you know, I was going past the loch and looking out the bus window, and I see what I thought was a big expedition set up. You know, there's a big like model of the sea serpent up on top of the van that was parked at the side of the road. And so I mentioned that to the bed and breakfast, to the lady that I was staying there. I said, "Oh, I see the expedition." She said, "There's no expedition," and I described it to her. She said, "Oh, that's the guy with the hot dog van."
That's
So
awesome.
you got to get your foot long sea serpent monster or something on the way up to the loch. You know, but I do have my little uh, Loch Ness the rubber monster sea serpent that I hang right above my computer. It's been collecting dust since 1982.
Wow, that's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. Been a while since I was there, but I would do it again. It is a long trip, and it's gotten a little bit harder to more difficult to travel these days with the airline restrictions, and they keep taking out seats until pretty soon there won't be any seats at all. Maybe they want to just have everybody stand. I don't know, but that's not why we're here to denigrate the airlines. So
Well,
we could
I'll tell you,
do
in
what we
my
do.
opinion, I believe that the things that people say are just, myth and legend, I believe that a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff is real. And I believe that mermaids exist. And I believe that, centaurs existed. And I believe
Mhm.
the Loch Ness Monster exists. And I believe that stuff.
Well, you know, I don't. Yeah, I don't think you could. I don't think you could. If you're in this field at all, like I guess what would we call it? Alternative science or paranormal. I don't. If you can't believe in the Loch Ness monster, maybe you should find another. Like a hobby or something. I think. I mean, because that's to me that's kind of like on the bottom of the uh, believability scale or the top, depending upon which way you're looking at it. It's pretty easy to imagine that there might be a few dragons and serpents and gorillas and all just wandering around, the planet with a bunch of cryptoids here and there and an invisible race or two. It's all very challenging.
It definitely is. Can you start out by sharing with us a little bit about what got you interested in UFOs and aliens and stuff like that?
Well, I lived in a house that was haunted. We had poltergeist phenomena, lights going on and off and doors opening and closing. And I remember one time there was a chinaware plate on the kitchen table and it slid off and fell, 2.5 feet to the floor, and it didn't break. And that seemed to be pretty unusual. I had a few out of body experiences. My great grandfather saw a headless horseman in Kentucky behind the barn, but he was a very strict Baptist, so he didn't really maybe talked about it maybe once to my father, and nobody ever discussed it really in the family. Anyway, there's always been some association with the weird and the unusual and things that can't be explained, and so I kind of just grew up around this. We didn't think it was too unusual. At least my mother's side of the family, accepted it more than my dad's did. And then when I was 10 years old, I had the first of three UFO sightings. It wasn't an exceptional sighting, I mean, compared to what other people have had, but it was a warmer summer evening, like around twilight. And in those days, this would have been 1957, nobody had air conditioning. So you just kind of sat outside on the front stoop until it cooled off and then finally went inside where you roasted. But anyway, somebody came running up to where we were sitting on the porch and pointed out two objects in the sky. One was directly across the street in front of or on top of an abandoned, half demolished leather factory, I think it was. And then the other one was hovering pretty close to the house up above, straight up almost. And so these things circled in the sky for maybe about 15 minutes or so, till the one across the street looked like somebody pulled the light switch and it just blinked out. And finally we lost interest and went indoors. Now, I can't tell you I saw any little green men. There was no landing gear, no portholes or anything like that. They were just above the cloud layer, but I would say they were maybe pretty good size, and certainly under intelligent control. Now, apparently, other people had seen this as well in this particular town in New Jersey, because a day later there was a little item in the newspaper to the effect that other people had witnessed this unusual phenomena, but the authorities were saying that it was nothing more unconventional than a weather balloon. And even at the age of 10, I knew that this seemed to be under intelligent control. It wasn't a weather balloon like, bobbing and weaving in the air current. And, I don't know if I've ever seen a weather balloon. That's always the great scapegoat for UFO sightings is weather balloons. How many weather balloons, are floating by your window? We have a fellow here in New York by the name of Mark Brinkerhoff. I just did a book called UFO Repeaters. The Camera Doesn't Lie. It's about people who have repeated UFO sightings and the uncanny ability to go out and take photos of the sky, and UFOs appear on the on the film when it's developed. I don't know if anybody develops film, but however it works these days, digitally. Anyway, Mark actually looks out his window. He lives up near Central Park, and he takes photographs. He's been taking pictures since he was, like 10 years old or something like that. Some of them are rather dramatic. They're reproduced in the book. One I call the shadow being, it looks like the shadow of an alien. I call them ultra-terrestrials because we don't know if they're really alien or not. A shadow of a being inside of a port window or something. Anyway, he gets telepathic, messages telling him to pick up his camera, and he looks out the window and starts shooting these things, and people say, oh, they're just balloons. Well, what is somebody having a picnic outside of his window every day or, once a week or whatever it is? And it would be like one of these guys, on the street where they'll make your kid a balloon and make it into a horse or a pony or a dog or something. Here are all these things in the sky with all different shapes and all, and they're not, they're not balloons. I mean, balloons just don't hover outside your window, and he's not the type of guy to go out and hoax this. His wife would kill him. And it would like spoil the whole thing. But anyway, so I just started out kind of young with all this, and I went out and I bought a mimeograph machine. That was an early form of like printing press where you type the stencils and put it on the drum, and your mother get mad because ink got all over the house. It was very messy. But I started putting out a newsletter, and it started out as 10 pages with a print run of about 50 copies, and before I sold it out to a larger professionally printed publisher, I had 1,500 subscribers, and it was up to 40 pages. And you had to collate it and staple it and take it to the post office and address it. Not like today. It was like, it was a mess. My mother banned me to the back porch because there was like fingerprints. If it was a crime scene, I would have had fingerprints all over the refrigerator, the wall, everything, But so we started exchanging information with people all over the world. I mean, there were, today it's the internet and it's a lot easier. In those days, you'd have to send the magazine off to Japan and wait 3 or 4 months to get something back. And then we started a local group. We had some meetings, and eventually I ended up in publishing in New York. Jim Moseley took over my magazine, which was called the Interplanetary News Service Report, and he combined it with his professional magazine called Saucer News and hired me as managing editor and advertising director. And I've ended up editing 30 different magazines over the years, most of them having nothing to do with UFOs except for 2. One was called UFO Review, which was the official flying saucer newspaper. I think the only newspaper on the subject, actually published every couple of months. And then UFO Universe, which lasted for 11 years until basically the whole magazine publishing business just went belly up or belly down or whatever way it went. There's no, few magazines left, and it's all on the internet for free, which is okay, but it's no way to, make a living, certainly if you're a real publisher. But, so I've always just had an interest in this, but I've done a lot of other things. I've made horror movies. You can Google me as Mr. Creepo. And I've promoted rock and roll shows and a lot of different events. I was putting on conferences, paranormal and UFO conferences all over the country, I think long before anybody else that's currently doing it now. And I would still be doing it, except that it's such a labor. It's just so much work that I just can't put all. You got to like limit yourself at some point. I consider myself semi-retired. I only publish 5 or 6 books a month now.
Wow.
I know. In a nutshell, that's kind of how I got. It just kept snowballing. No matter what I did, I always ended up coming back to this. Even when I had a little public relations agency, and I had clients like Les Paul, the guitar player and musician, and Peter Max, the psychedelic artist, and a few other people, and anyway, I would go around to the magazines, and I would write articles. We had 3 or 4 other people writing with us, and I don't know when they found out I was into UFOs, even if it was some men's magazine like We or something that normally wouldn't publish this, they'd say, "Oh, do us a UFO article or something weird." So I managed to get UFO articles in the places where UFO articles were never published before and probably will never be published again, if the magazines are still in business even. But I know no matter what I do, I always come back to this. So finally one day I said, "Okay, you win. Whoever is telling me to do this," and I say that, I don't know if that's jokingly or not. People say, "Well, have you been abducted? Are you among the chosen?" Well, I don't know why anybody would choose me to do anything, but I don't know. I mean, it's weird. I don't think I've been abducted, but I guess I think we're all in this together. That's kind of what I tell people. Even if you have a different point of view than mine, something is kind of pushing us together to do something, and I'm not sure what that something is, to get the information out. Except that a lot of the information may be contrary to each other. It's a whole strange program going on out there, and you just got to kind of keep at it and try to separate in your own mind what you think is real and what isn't. Man.
I have Mark Brinkeroff actually coming on our show on the
Wonderful.
22nd of May, so it's going to be exciting too.
Yeah. See, now people say, "Oh, do you believe in Mark's stories, his experiences?" And to me, they're pretty far out to my way of thinking. He actually thinks that he was kind of like left here, and he's related to them. He's part of the alien family. Well, I don't know if I can buy that, to be honest with you. But on the other hand, I cannot dispute his uncanny ability to take these weird photographs of things in the sky that that should not be there, but are there and cannot be explained. So I mean, we've got 2 parts of the puzzle. We've got stuff that is evidential that you can actually look at, like my friend Ted Phillips collects soil samples from UFO landing cases. So you've got your evidence, physical or otherwise, in the form of photographs, and then you've got the information and the data that people believe, and the 2 of them don't necessarily, as far as I'm concerned, don't necessarily jive. But everybody's, unless you're a downright hoaxer like Billy Meyer or something. I mean, I just say we're all in this together. We shouldn't argue, like you do your thing and I'll do my thing, and eventually maybe we'll find out what the whole thing is all about.
Can you tell us about your out-of-body experiences at age 6?
Yeah, I've had a couple of them, throughout the years. As best as I can remember. I was floating up, I found myself floating up towards the ceiling, and my body was still in the bed below. And the most unusual part of the experience was that the room had changed colors. It was almost, we're talking about Peter Max, the psychedelic artist. It was almost psychedelic, and this was before psychedelics was even heard of. And not only was the room had changed color, but it was filled with strange musical sounds or notes or chords. I guess some people would call it the music of the spheres. And then I found myself back in the body, a few minutes later, and sweating profusely. And that happened to me a couple of times. And I found out actually there was kind of a way of doing it. I remember just when I was starting to get into the promoting rock concerts and all. I had gotten a letter from the gal who worked for the real concert art, the guy who booked like Madison Square Garden and the big halls in New York, and she was interested in the subject. Anyway, she had written me a letter explaining that she had. I was running the New York School of Occult Arts and Sciences. It was one of the first metaphysical centers in the country. I don't know, maybe the first even. And she had lost something, I think a ring or something. So I happened to read the letter just before, like, falling asleep. I probably fell asleep with it in my hand or something. And I saw, now, was this an out of the body experience or a dream or what? I don't know how to separate the two of them really. But I saw the ring behind a bureau, and I called her the next day and I described what I saw. And I described the bureau because I remember it had a piece of the top of the bureau that's, is upright, and it's got, like, fancy wood thing up on top, carving or something like that. She said, yes, it had been knocked off when the movers, bought it in the door and didn't look what they were doing. And the ring was where I told her. So you can do this by, I don't know, was it meditation or concentration or just putting your mind to it and then going into some altered state. And a couple other experiences like that. I don't claim to be a remote viewer. I dabble. I dabble at the psychic stuff. I mean, I've had my share of experiences in all. I remember when I had the occult center, there was a group of women. I had never seen them before, but they must have seen an ad in the newspaper, like the Village Voice or something, and they showed up for a panel discussion or something. And they said, well, if you really could do this, and the woman handed me a ring or something, to do some psychometry. And I said, yeah, I picking up the initial W, Whitney or something like that. She said, well, I don't know how you knew that, but we just came from the Whitney Museum. I mean, things like that. Other people are much better than doing it than I am. But I've had my share of psychic experiences, and that's that,
To your knowledge, what do aliens look like?
Oh, there's so many descriptions that it boggles the mind.
Well,
everything from
how many different aliens are there? I mean,
well, see, like I say, I don't call them aliens. I call them ultra-terrestrials because I don't know where they're from. I mean, like they don't show me their driver's license. You know what I'm saying? And also too, they seem to have the uncanny ability of changing shape. They are shapeshifters. To me, UFOs are not as much physical craft from other planets. They are more closely related to our own planet right here. I don't know whether they live alongside of us in another dimension, or whether they come from undersea bases, or whether they come from inside caves or something inside the hollow earth or inner earth. I mean, there could be any number of explanations for UFOs, and I don't think that most of them are from outer space. There may be a few wandering here, but why would they come on a daily basis, and why would we be the center of so much activity? I mean, there's not all that much going on down here that people would want to stop, unless you believe they're here to get gold or to take water back or some kind of minerals or something. But not everybody would have the same the same interests. I don't know. It just seems that they come in so many shapes and sizes, and they pilot so many different kinds of craft that they cannot possibly all be extraterrestrial. I think they're located a lot closer to us. That they have been here since the beginning of time and will be here till the end of time, and perhaps that's why they're interested in seeing that we don't destroy our planet, because it might take them along with us.
Do you think these beings are friendly?
Some of them are, and some of them are not. That's for sure. I mean, if you check the records, I mean, of people who have been abducted and all, from Whitley Strieber to all on down, pretty negative experiences. At least for a large, they've been examined and probed and prodded and dissected. The women claim that they've been impregnated, and then their fetuses are removed. I'm not sure if I buy that at all, but I mean, these are the stories that come to our attention. And of course, there are these what we call the nighttime invaders that come into your house and scrape your skin and leave markings and destroy your property and so forth. And then there are the people who claim contact with human-looking ultra-terrestrials that seem to be friendly and seem to be caring and seem to have great love. This would be the type of aliens that Mark Brinkerhoff says that he is in communications with. They look very similar to us. They are spiritually advanced. They have love in their, I was going to say heart, but I don't know what their anatomy consists of. So you have both negative and positive, and possibly a lot in between who just don't give a flying hoot.
Do you think that they walk amongst us daily? I mean, do you think that there's aliens that actually can shapeshift themselves to look like human beings and we don't even know the difference?
Well, maybe they don't have to shapeshift themselves. I think the shapeshifting process. I don't know how long you could take, like on one particular form, or whether you melt away back into your original, shape after a couple of hours. I can't tell you how the process works, but now, according to some people, well, let me tell you a story. Back many years ago, I guess this would have been in the late '70s. I was giving a lecture in Michigan, and after my talk, one of the professors at the school came up to me, and he said, I'd like to tell you something, but you have to promise not to use my name and so forth and so on. And I said, okay, I'll tell me your story, and I'll keep it, confidential, at least as far as your name and all goes. I always tell people, if I'm I'm gonna spend an hour or half an hour with you, I want to at least use the story, even if I don't use your name. I mean, if somebody says, well, you can't use it, well, what's the purpose in telling me then? Really. So anyway, he tells me the story about he has a lady friend of his, and one night she's driving outside of town, a few miles outside of town, and off to the shoulder of the road is a semi-wooded area, woods, but also a clearing. Anyway, she sees something that's lit up, that's resting on the ground, and it seems to be on tripod landing gear, and it's very unusual, and it's saucer-shaped, right? That gives you a clue right there. And so she kind of watches from afar, but close enough where she could identify the people getting out of the craft. There were, if I recall correctly, 3 men and a woman. And they were dressed in ordinary earth clothes, and they got into a car, regular car, probably a black Cadillac if we accept the Men in Black stories, because they always seem to travel in black Lincolns or town cars or something. Anyway, they get into the car and they drive off. And she's totally stunned by this. Of course, she's never given too much thought to UFOs or the fact that there are aliens landing here. We think of aliens as being little microbes on Mars or something these days. They always say, "Oh, we're going to discover alien life in the next 10 years." But what is the alien life? It's a little amoeba. Come on, give us a break. You're insulting our intelligence. Who even cares? To be honest with you, if there's a little, you can't pet it. You can't put it on a leash. You can't even see the darn thing. So what difference does it make? I mean, let's spend the time, these scientists and all these people that are out looking for signals from outer space, if they spent their time trying to figure out what was going on as far as the UFO mystery goes, it might be to everybody's advantage, but no, they want to get the funding for, telescopes and radio receivers and just total nonsense. But anyway, so a couple of days later, the same woman is doing some shopping in town. She's in the supermarket, and she's about to get in line, and she notices like 2 or 3 people in front of her in the checkout line, is one of the individuals that she saw getting out of the flying saucer. So she would like to approach him cautiously, but get a little bit closer and perhaps quiz him a little, and hope that he doesn't have a laser gun in his pocket or something. Or he doesn't want to invite her for lunch, if you remember the old Twilight Zone story episode. But anyway, by the time he gets out of the line and she pushes her way through, waiting for the customer in front of her, she gets outside and she looks up and down the parking lot, and he's nowhere to be seen. This individual is nowhere to be seen. No, it doesn't seem to be any movements of cars in and out of the lot. And she went and she told the local sheriff, and I guess basically he thought she was wackading hoy, and she sent her back out and said, don't bother him again about such nonsense. And I guess maybe she did see the same person, on one or two other occasions, but was too, afraid. I guess she'd get tasered by the cops or something like that. So she just left it alone and never told anybody else about it. But we've heard stories like this over the years where some of them look so much like us they can mingle in with society. And am I convinced of that? I don't know. If they are living here amongst us, possibly that they would look a lot like us. Now, in a lot of cases, in fact, even with Mark Brinkerhoff, we've asked them, could they live here amongst us? And he said, well, not very likely, because they do look a little bit peculiar in most cases. So they're a lot taller than we are. There's an incident in Italy that's also reported in the UFO Repeaters book, The Camera Doesn't Lie. We call it the friendship case, about a group of 50 people who actually met with these ETs on a regular basis, and all of them were quite tall. We're talking about 8.5, 9 feet tall. So, but they looked like us, but obviously, if you saw a group of them walking down the street, unless the Harlem Globetrotters were in town to do an exhibition or something, you might think that it would be kind of strange that 3 9-foot tall beings would be walking down the street. So, yeah, they could be living here amongst us, but maybe not so easily.
Huh.
There have been stories about them having their own communities. We have a book called UMO, and apparently in this book there are a series of researchers, I think mainly in Spain, started receiving a series of photographs of spaceships with the symbols on the side, and manuscripts telling about this city that had actually been set up in the mountains that was occupied totally by beings from the planet Umo.
Huh.
Yep. Again, I wasn't there, but a lot of the people seem convinced that the letters and the photographs are not a hoax. So it's Umo. Gotta believe in Umo, yeah.
I have your book, UFO Repeaters, and it was a very interesting book. Can you tell our audience a little bit about the different levels of consciousness that you talk about in your book?
Well, I don't now see the different levels of consciousness. Well, I would guess some of these UFO repeaters, claim that they are, they become strict vegetarians, they meditate. I don't know if that's necessary though to have a UFO experience, because I also know people on the other hand who chain smoke, drink a lot of liquor, and have done psychedelics and stuff, and they seem to have their own share of UFOs as well. So, I don't know as if I necessarily am big into like the levels of consciousness. I would think though that we should attune ourselves certainly to the planet around us. We should be conscious of things that are happening, and a lot of people, I think they just don't. They're so tied up with their jobs, getting to their jobs, which probably takes them an hour or an hour and a half. Some people, especially like in New York, they might have to take a train and 2 buses to get to work, and so their idea of relaxation is not to go out and skywatch. It's to go home and crack open a can of Heineken and watch the ball game. So you certainly have to be aware of everything around you, or you're never going to have a UFO experience. Now, that's not to say that people who have not been aware uh, have not had their share of experiences as well. There are other people who may meditate, who may be vegetarians or vegans or something, and they never have any experience. They're still waiting for, the mass landing of the space people to come down and pat them on the back, and it doesn't happen. Other people, on the other hand, are on their way home, at night, and they're driving along some desolate area, and boom, they're in the middle of something that they never thought about before in their entire life, which kind of reminds me of Johnny Sands. Johnny Sands is my friend. He's a country and western singer. He's a stunt man. He's been in a few movies, even going back as far as being in one or two with Elvis.
Wow.
And he's quite a character. I've had him on on my shows a couple of times. In fact, he was on an episode of UFO Hunters with me. It was one of the last episodes that was broadcast before the show went off the air. And he had an experience. It was, I think, New Year's Eve, or pretty close to New Year's Eve, and he was driving into Los Angeles. I think he was supposed to go and talk to somebody about about a performance or a series of gigs that they wanted him to do. So he's on the outskirts of town, still pretty much out in the desert, I guess. And this object lands in front of his automobile, which won't go anyway, even if he wanted to drive away, because it kind of just stalls. And he sees these two tall beings come out, and they had kind of strange pointed ears and were bald. He said he thought that they had fins, that they weren't really ears, they were fins, and they must maybe come from some aqua planet. Anyway, aquatic planet, a planet made of mostly of water. And they conversed with him telepathically for about 10 or 15 minutes. In fact, at one point, one of the beings put his hands behind his back and materialized a globe or an object about the size of a basketball, and waved his hand over it. It kind of levitated between the two of them, put his hands over it, passed his hand over it, and Johnny said he could see these miniature explosions like going off all over this globe, and the being said this is what's could happen to your planet if you don't give up the use of nuclear energy, negative use of nuclear energy, and your warlike activities. And the telepathic conversation went on for a few minutes, and then the beings got back in the craft and the objects took off. And his car started, and he rolled into town. Well, he got into town, and he spoke to the fellow at the, I think it was the Sands Hotel. And they had him they brought in an artist, and they had the artist recreate what this being looked like. And they called the newspaper, and it made the front page of, I think it's the Las Vegas Sun. And he had some other weird experiences after that involving what we would call the Men in Black, where he was actually taken out to the desert. There was a row of automobiles, and I don't know, he seemed like he was drugged or something happened to him where it was almost like a dream-like experience, but it wasn't a dream. And he saw these two, like Bigfoot creatures, like seemed to be guarding the limousine that he was in. It's a very strange story, as most of the UFO experiences are. But again, he has no reason to make this story up, and he also passed a lie detector test, which I know some people think, well, lie detector tests are not foolproof, but it's about as good as you're going to get. I believe more in the lie detector, I would say, than hypnosis, because under hypnosis, first of all, let's say if I had a UFO experience, it seems to me that I would pick out the individual who is most closely aligned with my thinking on what the extraterrestrials are all about. If I have a negative experience, I'm probably going to go to Dr. Jacobs. If I have a friendly experience, I probably would have gone to John Mack. I'm not sure who you would go with today because, of course, both Dr. Mack and Bud Hopkins are deceased, but there are other people out there who are doing the hypnosis. But I don't know. I mean, people can have they have false memories under hypnosis. So I'd rather go for the polygraph exam than I would for the hypnosis. I don't know. It's just whatever you accept. But people are having these experiences, and some of them are positive, and some of them are downright negative.
You talk in your book about Stella Lansing, and I wondered
Hmm.
if you could tell us about her.
Oh yes. Well, I was helping Jim Mosley. He was the publisher of this magazine, Saucer News, in the mid and late 1960s. He was the one that had taken over my Interplanetary News Service report and hired me as managing editor. And on once or twice a month, he would have meetings in the Times Square area of Manhattan. I mean, that's when people did, there wasn't too much on TV about the subject. People actually got together and wanted to hear people lecture on the topic. So he would bring in different speakers, people, some locally, and others who would be coming through town on a lecture tour, like the contactees, George Adamski, George Van Tassel, you name them, they would come through Manhattan, on their way up to New England, I guess, or down to Miami. And, people say, oh, they were just in it to make money. Well, there's no money to be made. Even in the contactees knew that. I mean, what was the best they could do is sell a photograph of, a copy of their photographs or something. And most of them took the bus, the Greyhound, wherever they were lecturing, into the next city and stayed on somebody's couch or what have you. It was not necessarily a glamorous life, but they all believed that they had some information that the public must should know about. So anyway, I was kind of a Jim's assistant because he was usually too busy running around setting up the folding chairs and trying to get the microphone to work and the slide projector to get the slides in, the right way and not upside down like usually happens. And so this woman came up to me, and now this would have been maybe, I guess, the late 60s. I wish I had kept a journal or a diary, because I'm terrible when it comes to dates. It's all I can tell you is it happened in the last 50 years. But I guess it was the late 60s. And this lady came up to me and she said she would like to make a presentation at these little meetings, and they mostly, unless you were on the Long John Nebel show, that was the big talk show, and he discussed the subjects on the UFOs and paranormal and psychic phenomena long before Art Bell and anybody else. And if you managed to get on his show the night before, you might get a couple of 100, 300 people for your talk. Otherwise, there'd be anywhere from maybe 60 to 90 people in the room. Anyway, Stella said she had these photos and movies that she had taken. She lived up in New England, not far from Betty Hill. I think maybe that's kind of what got her interested in the subject. She read about Betty Hill, and she would go out with her 8mm and 16mm home camera. Pretty primitive stuff. I mean, we're not talking about the video cameras of today. I mean, so she would take some footage, and when she had the film developed, sometimes she would see odd things in the sky, but when she developed the film, it often wasn't what she saw. It would be something else. There were faces and clocks and planes flying upside down and all manner of weird objects that just shouldn't be there. And she put them up for she tried to get them analyzed to see. Some people said, "Oh, there's a light leak in the camera," or this and that. Well, this didn't look like a light leak at all. I mean, there was structure to this, and the people that were in the film should just not be there. And it's not. She would use a variety of cameras so that they couldn't say that there was something wrong with the camera, and pretty much on a regular basis, all these weird things would show up on the film. In fact, I have a YouTube channel. It's Mr. UFO's Secret Files, or maybe it's just under Tim Beckley. If you go there, you can see like an 8 minute clip of an interview that was on TV back around in the 70s sometime. And it shows, if you don't have a copy of the book, we'd like you to get the book, UFO Repeaters, The Camera Doesn't Lie. But you can go to YouTube and you can look at this video interview with Stella. And anyway, so she did finally, I convinced Jim. He thought at first, well, this is kind of odd. He was not a big believer in any of this strange paranormal stuff. He thought that UFOs probably were being built here on Earth by the CIA or something like that. I mean, he didn't even go too much for the extraterrestrial theory, although later on he did get to believe that some of these things were from some other dimension or something. Anyway, she gave her talk, and she was investigated by other researchers, and they were pretty much convinced that there's something truly odd, about her being able to take these film, 8 millimeter and 60 millimeter footage. And other people have the same ability. They can just go out with the camera. And even Betty Hill, I don't think people realize this, but towards the last few years of her life, she would actually go to the area where she had her, UFO experience, and she would sit there with the camera and send out a telepathic message and hope that they would return. And she did get one or two photographs that I think are inconclusive, but some people think, oh, she was just getting older and she imagined this. I don't know. Some people, again, just seem to attract this type of phenomena. And Betty, it turned out, her family, I think when she was a kid, something had landed on her parents' or her grandparents' farm up in New Hampshire or up in that area of New England. So her abduction experience with Barney Hill might not have been actually the first one that they happened in the family as far as the UFO things go. And after that experience, she was always interested. After she tried to get rid of the negative aspects of it, or it just became more comfortable with it, she actually tried to see if she could get them to come down again. And there are some people who have that ability, like Mark Brinkerhoff, that seems to be able to get them to come down. Howard Menger was another one, fellow that I met, and he was had moved from. Let me get a swig of water here. Go ahead. I swear it's water. And Howard lived had moved when he was pretty young with his parents to the rural town of Highbridge, New Jersey. Now, he was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, but his parents, for some reason, thought that he had a brother, that they should move to some place that was a little bit safer and a little less hectic for two youngsters to grow up in. So they purchased themselves a farm with a big apple orchard out back. And when he was rather young, I think maybe 10 or 11 years old, he was running through the field back of the house with his brother. And on several occasions, they saw these strange disc-shaped objects come overhead and seemed to hover over the field while they were out running around and playing. At some point, one of the objects landed. Apparently, his brother was not there at the time. They were more interested in Howard than his brother. They thought he had the spirituality, or had something inside of him that made him a better contact, higher vibrations. I don't know, whatever you're trying to be, a consciousness or something to that degree. So, at a very young age, he had a conversation with a very attractive woman who sat on a rock near him and spoke to him for about a half an hour. Said that they had chosen him, that he should go out and as he grew up and tell people that there was life on other planets, and that they were friendly, and that they were here to help us, and that they've been coming here for centuries and are looking out for our well-being and so forth. So now there were not quite a number of people. I just didn't accept this at the face value, because Howard would go on to the Long John Nebel show and some of the other programs that were on, and tell these experiences, and people would think, oh, this is this is so far-fetched that it can't possibly be true. Howard was one of the few contactees on the East Coast. Most of them were, located in California or in Arizona or something like that. So Howard would go on the show, and Long John had quite a listening audience. He was heard like in 20 or 30 states in those days. He was on from midnight till 5 o'clock every morning, I think 6 or 7 days a week. And all his shows were not on UFOs or the paranormal, but a couple of times a week he sat around and discussed this with a whole panel of people, some who were believers, like Jackie Gleason, and others like science fiction writers like Arthur C. Clarke and Lester Del Rey, who were very, very skeptical and very condescending towards anybody who claimed that they had any experiences of this time. I mean, sometimes I think the program almost ended in a mayhem there on the show. I remember one time Dan Fry, who was claimed to be an engineer, had an experience where he was picked up by a UFO and took a ride from New Mexico to New York and back in about 20 minutes or something like that. And he had UFO experiences and claimed that he had actual proof, and he brought out on the air some sort of device or something that he had taken off the ship. And I guess, this was some sort of physical evidence, or at least he claimed it was. Well, two of the panelists dived for the object, I guess, to grab it from him so that they could have it analyzed or prove that it wasn't what he claimed that it was. So a whole fight broke out in the studio there in WOR. But anyway, Howard's story was very impressive in that other people had gone out to his farm there and had seen these objects on their own, and Howard took some photographs as well as some 16 millimeter motion pictures of these craft coming in. And now I remember one time I got a telephone call. Like I say, I just didn't accept this at face value. I always look for whatever possible evidence that I can that I could find to support claims like this, which are pretty far-fetched. But I remember I did get a telephone call one day from a gentleman who told me he had a story to relate, and would I listen to him? And I said, sure, go ahead, tell me the story. And he said he had heard Howard on the air on the Long John show, right? And the show had gotten started at midnight, and I guess it was maybe an hour and a half or 2 hour drive out to Howard Menger's place. So he decided, well, he's going to take a drive out to the property, and he's going to park somewhere nearby, and he's going to sit there and just sit there all night long and see if he sees anything weird in the sky. So he takes his car and he goes behind Howard's house out in the field without letting Howard or anybody know that he was, there. But of course, Howard was in New York anyway, because there was no, they didn't do telephone interviews and stuff in those days. They actually had, what a concept! You actually were in the recording, in the studio. And so anyway, he parked back there, and I guess it was about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And the next thing he knows, the sun is up, and the birds chirping and all kinds of activity in the field. And this would have been one of the first cases that I ever heard of missing time. Of course, it wasn't called missing time then because nobody had heard of missing time. Anyway, so the fellow went on to tell me about how he felt compelled after this incident to, he separated from his wife. He went out and he bought a mobile home or a trailer and set up shop inside and became somewhat of a tinkerer. I guess he was into, creating inventions and gadgets and so forth, and started like building stuff, which he thought he was being guided by maybe the same beings that were in contact with Howard Menger. I never did he invited me to see his trailer, but I didn't have a car at the time, I guess, and I don't know. I never spoke to him again after that, or maybe once before. But other people seem to be affected by these people these UFO repeaters. I mean, people that were just into the same vibe, they also would have their own share of experiences, things that would kind of back up, what these UFO repeaters were saying.
When you talked about Stella Lansing, was
Yeah.
that was what she was doing? Is that what's called thoughtography?
Yeah, yes, I guess you would call it. You could call it that. Now, we first heard of this or something very similar. There was a fellow by the name of Ted Sirius. I think he lived around the Chicago area because I know Fate magazine, which came out of Evanston, Illinois, did a couple of articles about him. But he would sit there with a Polaroid camera and would take photographs. Just hold the camera in front of him and take photos of his, his face or his forehead or what have you. And he had, in fact, he had developed a device he called a gizmo, which he would put in front of the lens of the camera, and he would sit there either by himself, I guess, or later on, with other researchers who would make sure that he was not faking any of this. And when he pulled the photos out and laid them on the table, they were Polaroids. There would be all kinds of scenes and shapes, and pretty much like Stella Lansing's. But these were stills; these were Polaroids, and some of them they actually found were buildings and structures that were taken around the world. And if you asked him to take like a photograph of the Taj Mahal or something, he would sit there and concentrate, and you would get a vague blurred image of a structure that kind of looked like the Taj Mahal. So this is the first that we had kind of heard of this thought photography, and then it became rather popular for quite a while. Some other people were doing it as well with various degrees of success, and probably are now. But I guess like electronic voice phenomena seems to be, more the thing these days than the thought photography. But that's basically what it was: is concentrating and trying to get images to appear. But I guess in the case of Stella Lansing at first, I don't even think she was trying to get the images to appear. It's not what she was concentrating on. She would just go out and take this her camera with her and photograph the sky, and whammo, there were these strange objects and apparitions, materializations on the film. And they cut. You know what was even a stranger part of this? They cut across the sprockets. If you look at a strip of film, 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, there's the frame and then a little sprocket in between. Well, the images would be across the sprockets, which is totally unheard of. Nobody could explain how that would happen. I mean, it's not a light leak in the camera.
I've taken pictures in the past,
Yes.
and come up with what everybody kept saying was double exposure. But
Uh-huh.
the crazy thing is these pictures that I actually still have to this day, the double exposure in them are people I've never seen before.
Wow. Okay. Now, were these taken? What were the circumstances of you doing this?
I just taken pictures of my
Oh, just take. Oh,
family and
oh, I see. Okay.
my
It wasn't.
parents, my
Well, then
grandparents.
you ought to get out there with that camera and take a couple of. I was going to say rolls. There's no rolls of film anymore. But take a bunch of photographs and see if anything appears on it. Of course, now people go out and they get globes, and some of them is specks of dust and things like that. I mean, it's obvious raindrops on the lens looks a lot, but some of them you can tell, or not. I mean, orbs, not globes. Well, orbs, globes. The bigger ones we call globes, and the smaller ones would be orbs. Uh, there's another fellow that I interviewed that's up on YouTube. His name is Tom Dongo, Dongo, and he lives out in Sedona, Arizona. And now I met Tom at my hotel room when I was staying there, and I always like to, wherever I'm going, I always like to call in advance and find an interesting story to somebody to interview or videotape or something. So I had heard about this fellow who had a large collection of photographs, and so I asked him to bring some to the hotel with him, and I set up the camera in the room. I mean, I always call mine it's unofficial, uncensored, unbalanced, and I just take a tripod with me and put the camera up, and I'm on one side of the camera, and the subject of the interview is on the other side of the camera, and I put it up, and I don't edit it. I mean, it's offered for free, and it's I'm not even very good at editing, and I have to go out and hire somebody to do it. Well, I do have somebody, my friend Peter. He puts the titles and stuff on there now, so it looks looks pretty good. But it's the information, not the quality of the video so much. Anyway, so he comes. Tom Dongo comes to my hotel room. I'm there with my friend Charlotte Jean, who sometimes accompany when I'm out to Arizona. She's a local member of one of the UFO groups there, and we've been friends for years. So she'll drive me to these different places, and we'll look for UFOs, and sometimes other people will tell us their experiences. Anyway, so Tom comes to the hotel, and he has several scrapbooks, pretty large scrapbooks, full of photographs of people who, some of these pictures he has taken himself, and some of the photos other people have shared with him. Now, the same thing happens. On some occasions, they do see weird lights in the sky because Sedona is full of them. And on other occasions, these objects and even individuals just appear when the photos are developed. There's a picture in the UFO Repeaters book of what he calls the Blue Man, who they did not see, but there's this strange gentleman that's apparently standing there next to them when they develop the photograph, who looks a little odd. I mean, you ask, well, could he pass for somebody here on this planet? Yeah, you might think he was a little strange if he was walking down the street. In the photo, he looks like he's got kind of like a blue tint of skin color or something, and very strange ears and a haircut that only somebody from somewhere else would have, I think. But anyway, he has all these photographs, and one of them that's in the book, I call it Chronos. There was a movie, a terrible science fiction movie that was done maybe about 25 years ago that was called Chronos, and it was about this huge metal structure that came up out of the ground. I think the aliens were invading or something. Terrible movie. It just didn't even make very much sense. But it was so bad that, I remember it. Anyway, this woman took a photograph, or somebody took a photograph of her standing in front of one of the Bell Rock or Cathedral Rock, and it's beautiful country there. I mean, it's the Red Rock country. It's just, unbelievable. It's just the opposite of being in New York or somewhere, in the East here. It's just fantastic. And a lot of people, of course, New Agers like Shirley MacLaine have some property there. They go there for the feel the vibrations, the openness of the air, and to be, commune with the nature and the cosmos. And a lot of people do claim to have mystical experiences there. Anyway, this scrapbook is just loaded with just the photograph. And I've seen people from all over the world whenever I travel with these key, what I call hotspot areas, where they have sightings or window areas where they appear on a regular basis. And there'll always be somebody there who is like the main person, the main researcher, and they'll have a scrapbook full of photographs of unknown, and they're all of different shapes and sizes. We're not just talking about disc-shaped objects or bell-shaped objects or cigars. We're talking about, like a parade in the sky. There's a town in England. Town is Warminster. Back on Christmas Day, I think it was 1974, a woman was on her way to church services, and all of a sudden she heard this tremendous sound and was pushed to the ground. And they asked her, the whole area was besieged by UFO sightings. The main object became known as the Thing, and people came from all over Europe. David Bowie, the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger and all. They have a UFO sighting outside of this town, Warminster, in an area known as Cradle Hill. And I went there in the early 1980s. By that time, most of the activity had lessened and people had lost interest, and the sightings were not as frequent as they had been previously. But I had been invited over to England by my friend, the 8th Earl of Clancarty, Brinsley Laporte Trench. He had set up an unofficial UFO organization inside the House of Lords, and he had speakers come at their own expense to deliver messages to those that attended the meeting. He had like maybe 80 or 100 members of Parliament that came to the meetings on a regular basis. I guess this would be the original disclosure long before the word was coined. I mean, he was trying to get Her Majesty's government to release their files on UFOs, which of course they did years and years later. So if it wasn't for Brinsley, maybe that never would have happened. But anyway, I went over there to deliver like an hour talk. And then that's the time I went up to Loch Ness. I took the midnight train from London up through up to Inverness. Beautiful, beautiful train ride. And I had also went to Stonehenge, of course. What tourists wouldn't go to Stonehenge? It's like coming down to see the Empire State Building here. Different experience, certainly. But, I mean, there's always one tourist attraction, and that certainly is one that everybody that goes to England probably wants to go and see. And anyway, I got off the train at the Stonehenge and spent a little time there, and then went on my way to Warminster and met Arthur Shuttlewood. Now, he was the fellow who was the editor of the daily newspaper, the Warminster Journal. He had started out as a skeptical reporter. Now, the town is very small, like 9,000 people, I think it was at that point. Very rural, way out from London, like maybe an hour and a half trip, pretty close to Stonehenge. And he started out as a skeptic on this. By little, after talking to people who had these experiences on a regular basis, he turned around to become a pretty wide-eyed believer, having a lot of observations of his own. And when we met, he introduced me to a fellow by the name of Robert Strong. Now, Bob was a former RAF pilot, retired, of course, and he was the guy who went out at night, mounted a tripod on his car, the roof of his car, and sat there all night long, and over a period of years took some really amazing photographs, things that looked like giant bats in the sky, trains, cigars, you name it, it was there. And the unfortunate thing was he was such a devoted individual to the subject that he would lend his photographs out to people to make copies of it. And of course, they never bought the photographs back. So a lot of history has been lost. But those sightings there went on for well over 10 years and continued to some degree even to this day. In fact, my friend Kevin Goodman, who lives over in England, every year now he has a small UFO conference in Warminster to get together people, who have had sightings there or who are still drawn to the area. In fact, I think his conference this year is in August. One could go to Facebook and just type in, I think, UFO, Warminster UFO Skywatchers or Kevin Goodman, and you'll find a lot of information there on this conference and photographs of what they've seen over the years and links to different newsletter and so forth. In fact, I plan to have him on my podcast, Unraveling the Secrets, in a couple of weeks, if we can get the time difference all straightened out, because there's about, I think, 7 or 8 hours time difference between the East Coast and England, and so the guys are either still sleeping or on their way to work or something like that, but it should be an interesting conversation. But again, Bob Strong had this huge scrapbook full of UFO photos, and I've published a lot of them in the book UFO Repeaters. And if you go to YouTube, my God, so everything is on YouTube. I mean, if you type in Warminster or Arthur Shuttlewood, there's like an hour and a half documentary that was made back in the 70s, the mid-70s on the town. And you can see some of these people that are actually interviewed, and they go on a Skywatch and and stuff like that. So you can spend your whole day on researching the internet on the internet for all of the stuff, and then you back it up with some personal investigation or research of your own, and whammo, pretty soon you've maybe got some conclusions, or maybe you're more confused than ever. I don't know, but it's a fascinating subject, and it certainly has had me hooked for half a century. I guess I'm one of the real old timers in the field now. I mean, there are a few others maybe that have been around close to 50 years, but not that many of them. The first generation has passed away, and it's just luckily I have a pretty good memory for this stuff. I can't remember where I left my keys a half an hour ago, but I can tell you where somebody's sighting report is in my file cabinet, and I got like 40 file drawers full of this stuff. It's just amazing, and I'm allergic to dust, and boy, nothing collects dust like old papers and files and books. And if you hear the sound of ambulances and police cars, we're having quite a storm outside. I can hear hail on my air conditioner. I don't know.
Isn't that crazy? It hailed earlier too here.
Yeah, I get the weather. I don't know if the UFOs are behind this or not, but the weather has just been absolutely nuts. I mean, climate change, every day.
No kidding. And they're spraying. They're spraying like crazy up there, and I don't know why.
It's wild, But I guess the flash floods today. I've seen a few times in Manhattan here where the FDA very often. I think that was Hurricane Andrew. I remember it was pretty much like that. But boy, you travel around and you get caught in some of these storms, and I mean, you don't think you're ever going to get out. I remember a couple of times in the Yucatan. Of course, it rains there every day in the summertime, but they had this one place. I had gone to the pyramids, the Mayan pyramids, and there had been a lot of UFO sightings there. So I took a expedition trip there, and this resort that we were staying in. It had like a lobby that had no roof to it, like an outdoor skylight, but huge, right? Anyway, it rained so much that I thought the piano was going to float away, and it took like a half an hour for everybody to get out of the hotel back into the bus to go back to Acapulco or wherever we were going. I mean, so. Some places, I guess, are kind of used to this, but here tornadoes even come now through Brooklyn, which we don't remember hearing about before. And it's always kind of fascinated me because one of the 30 magazines that I edited over the years, and this is back in the 1975, was called Front Page Disasters. And every issue I would sneak some kind of paranormal or weird article into it. I mean, it was normal disaster magazines, storms and Johnstown flood and Galveston, Texas, the grain feeder blew up and airplane crashes and all. But every issue, I would sneak some, like strange story in, like, 400 planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle or something like that, or the missing army. Brigade that went into the fog and never came out. So every issue, readers were assured of finding something that they probably didn't expect to find in their copy of Front Page Disasters, which is a collector's item. It's so much of a collector's item, it's kind of hard to find. I did see somebody selling it though on Amazon or eBay the other day. But that was one of my favorite magazines outside the UFO field.
This stuff is very fascinating to me as well. I've always been into the paranormal myself since I was a kid. And, I do tarot cards and stuff like that. But the UFO stuff, I kind of got into that more recently in the last few years. But it just seems like it's such a growing phenomenon now that everybody's talking about it. Everybody's having experiences,
Well, well, one of the reasons for that is because there's more media than ever before. I mean, we're talking about television, we're talking about podcasts, we're talking about streaming, DVDs. There's just more places to get information out where before there wasn't. I mean, unless you could call up the local talk show and get on, to talk about this. Now, some of the hosts were open to this, and others would say we don't cover that, the politics and all that stuff, But there have been waves of interest in the paranormal. Of course, now are you near Rochester or?
Yes, it's about 40 minutes away from my house.
Oh, okay. Well, of course, that was kind of the beginning of the spiritualist movement. The Fox Sisters, where they had the wrappings on the wall and all, and of course, even the Church of the Latter-day Saints, the apparition of the supposed angel and the buried gold plates. That was in upstate New York. And then Osby, which is one of my favorite books, even though it's rather difficult to understand. Our edition of Osby is only 1,250 pages. So, and it's got all these spirit beings and angels and all of that. I mean, some people have made a life study of Osby, and other people, read 2 pages and figure it's not for them, But it's got everything you ever wanted to know about the paranormal is hidden somewhere in the pages of Osby. Just don't ask me to find it for you.
I'll have to remember that. I gotta get that.
Oh yeah. Well, we had a lady on our show unraveling the secrets, and she talked about. She was an expert on Osby. She's written a couple of books on the subject. Now, Suzanne Martinez. My co-host didn't quite grasp it because it's different. I mean, it's like unless you've really studied it or read up on it, it's not that easy to grasp the concept. The book actually was channeled, I guess, if you want to call it channeling. There was a dentist by the name of Nuremberg, I believe his name was. This would be around 1870 or so. And he had a materialization of he was a dentist, and he had a materialization of an angel in his room, and the angel told him to purify himself over a period of so many years, fasting, vegetarian food, and all that stuff, and to cleanse yourself, your body and your soul, and that they would appear to him. Well, over a period of X number of months or years, he used one of the first typewriters, which supposedly would only type like 20 words a minute at the most, but he managed to knock out this 1,200-page book at 80 words a minute. And it's the history of the planet for, I think, something like 40,000 years. But there are other books like that. We have our own edition of Osby, which is kind of hard to get because we only print it on demand. I mean, it's got color plates in it, and it's $100 or something like that. But we have another book which is up on Amazon. In fact, people who want to find out what we publish, because we got 200 books, I just tell them go to Amazon and either type in my name, Timothy Beckley, or Inner Light Global Communications, and all these beautiful covers and all will appear. And there's all kinds of blogs up there and photographs and amazing stuff. And then you can get a free subscription to the Conspiracy Journal. Just email us. You can find conspiracyjournal.com and fill out your email address and submit it, and we'll send you more stuff in the mail and over the internet. Then you'll know what to do with. But great stuff. I mean, it's we're the only outfitter company that's it's me and a couple other people, Sean Castile and Tim Schwartz and all that are producing this stuff on a regular basis. We do a lot of new books, but we also take a lot of the old classics that are out of print, reset to type, put on beautiful new covers, write some new material on the topic to bring it up to date, and put it out for people to collect. And of course the books on Kindle are very inexpensive. I'm not a big ebook reader myself. I still like the printed page. I like to get a book in the mail and open it up and smell the print and the ink and all of that. You can't do it with a Kindle. Yeah, I mean, but Kindle's a great device. Don't get me wrong. It's amazing. I've got one here with less than $100. In fact, I'm talking on it now. I don't know how it does all this stuff. I can believe that aliens left it at Roswell. No doubt about it.
You never know.
In fact, here you are, and that's an alien. Right? Your little logo there.
That's right. That's exactly right.
There you go. There you go. So they're always watching you. I'm convinced.
This has been absolutely great having you on here. Can you make sure that you get your websites out there so that these people,
Oh my
you know,
goodness, yes. Well, if anybody wants to email me, it's a pretty simple address to remember. Mr. UFO8 at hotmail.com. And Mr. is not spelled out. It's just MR UFO, the number 8 at Hotmail. And I'll lead you. And if you just Google me, there's 20,000 pages and all kinds of free videos. And go to YouTube and type in my name and go to my podcast. And, like, I'm sure people are doing it. I never even heard it. But, don't be shy because I'm interested in hearing people's stories and exchanging information. I'm always on Facebook, posting, pasting, whatever I'm doing there, and chatting with people and all. And I'm luckily I can task. Sometimes I'm watching something on TV. I've got the Kindle, 2 Kindles in front of me, and I'm reading. So I'm a information junkie. I guess that's better to be an information junkie than any other kind, I suppose. But I just sit here, day and night, and I become part of the chair. I'm officially furniture, and I just do this, and then I do the next go work. Even now that I'm semi-retired, I'm doing 5 or 6 books a month. I'm editing, putting together, publishing.
that's awesome.
Well, see, luckily I've been collecting this material for 50 years, so I've got a lot of material to go back, into it and put it together. And then like I say, some of the new material, like the UFO repeaters, the camera doesn't lie. There's probably 100 photographs in there that have never been published before. That's our first. That's my UFO breakthrough book. We haven't had a UFO book in a long time that really had much impact because there's so many UFO books. You go to Amazon and you type in a subject like ghost or something, and it'll tell you how many books are available. 15,580 or something. So how do you even find anything? I mean, like, what do you decide on that you want to read if you want to read anything at all? It boggles the mind how many books are out there, not only on this subject, but on anything that you could possibly imagine. I mean, you just type it in and it's in your e-stream either in 5 minutes or on your doorstep in 2 days.
Right.
Totally amazing. So it's conspiracyjournal.com, Mr. UFO's Secret Files on YouTube, Unraveling the Secrets on PSN-radio. If you don't put the dash in between PSN and radio, you'll get a Spanish-speaking station. So that's it. That's me in a nutshell.
Well,
or in a UFO shell or something.
I learned a lot today, and I am very thankful to have you on.
Well, you're welcome. I enjoy sharing the information and chatting. I enjoy, meeting new people and especially, like people who are, putting one of these programs together is not easy. As like I say, I used to do UFO conferences, but boy, that was a lot of work. You try to get organize an event where you got 40 speakers and workshops and try to get the media to come, and that blew me out of the box after doing that for many, many years. The podcast isn't quite so bad, but it's still, you got to wait to hear. Well, even in fact, today I was late in getting to Skype here because I forgot the time. I mean, I'm shuffling around looking for my notes that I had made, and of course my desk is a perpetual mess. It never, I mean, that we just move one pile of stuff to a box and then move another box on top of it, and so it just, like, finding anything is next to impossible. I finally had to clean out an old file drawer that I hadn't used in years. I mean, I don't know what I have anymore. It's just like, it's all encompassing. But it was my pleasure, and I'm available for, movies and videos and anything else.
Yeah, we'd definitely love to have you back on. Absolutely. Love to have you back on.
All right.
Well, thank you. And I really suggest to our listeners to, get on your sites and buy these books. I have UFO repeaters that you sent me, and I'll tell you that book is fascinating.
Isn't it? Tim Schwartz, who also is a writer, and he's got his own show, The Outer Edge, and with Michael Mott, and he's designs our books and writes for him, and he's really learned the craft. If this were 20 years ago in Manhattan here, we'd be pumping this stuff out and charging like $1,000 a cover or something, but now of course everybody's at home doing their own stuff, and it's not quite the same. Boy, I could do a whole show on printing. I've seen I wasn't there when they invented the Gutenberg press, but pretty much somewhere along the line, what we've gone through is, as far as to see it today like it is, it boggles the technology. If you get the technology to work, and some people are afraid of it. I have a lot of friends, my age, who are afraid of the technology. And I would sit here and pull my hair out and threaten to throw my laptop out the window. But now I've become to realize that I am in control and they are not.
That's right.
And so I find out that it works much better now when I have that attitude.
I'll tell you, my significant other, who I've been with for 6 years, he is phenomenal at this, web design and stuff.
Yes.
He is amazing. He does all my work for my show, and he is amazing. I could not even imagine doing what he does and having it come out so perfect the way he does.
Well, some people have it's like learning the piano, or maybe people say, "Oh, what school of journalism did you go to?" No, I failed English in high school, or just about. I mean, some people just have a knack for doing this stuff, and what you do, I couldn't do, and vice versa. And technology, I got my boys out there. I got Bill Kern and Tim Schwartz and Peter Bernard, and I mean, they know the ropes as far as that goes. And I sit here, I come up with the titles and the concepts, and keep the ship afloat.
Absolutely. That's what I do. I do the interviewing, and he comes up with all my graphics and my music, and I'll tell you, he's phenomenal. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for him.
Well, how long have you been doing this now?
I just started in February. Actually, L.A. Marzulli was my first interview in February, and right now we're getting ready to figure out a platform to go live.
Well, most people listen to the archive shows. I have found that out, because people, just like you would try to get in touch with me today and I didn't remember, there's so much going on in people's lives. Do get a good archive and put the stuff up on YouTube, and that's where they will follow you to a large degree. I mean, unless you got a really, really huge audience, everybody's going to go and I'd say 75% of the people go and listen to the archive. So get an archive that's easy for people to understand, because some of these pages are, you can look around for a podcast till you're blue in the face and finally give up, because it'll take you from one page to the other, and you got to make it simple. Anyway, I thank you for your time.
I thank you very much for your time as well.
I thank you for your listeners for tuning in, and I hope to hear from some of them, and hope to hear from you later on. So you have a good evening.
Definitely. Thank you. You too. That was a phenomenal interview, you guys. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I love this UFO stuff, and the more I can learn about it, the better. I think there's a lot more out there than what we see with, some of us don't get that opportunity to ever see a UFO or an alien, but that doesn't mean I don't believe that they're out there and amongst us. I'm so glad you guys join us here each week. And we're definitely thinking about figuring out how to go live here and making a career out of this. Right now, we're just viewer supported, and we're kind of, going by, whatever, your donations, and those donations, I'd like to thank you so much for. They help out so much to keep us on here, and they help us towards our goal of going live. Well, that's all we have time for today, and we post all of our shows on YouTube. That's our archive right now. And if you want to know more about our guests and our upcoming shows, you just visit us at Info2Rail. All you got to do is Google Info2Rail, and click on our Google Sites page. From there, you can go right to our YouTube. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us here each week. And we hope to see you back here. Each and every week, we have so many great guests and so much coming up for you. We actually have, when I have the date, I will let you guys know. But we're going to go to Willard Insane Asylum. It's not too far from where I live. It's in Ovid, New York, and we're going to go up there doing a tour. And we're actually going to go up there and film, and that's going to be one of our shows. So by the next show, I'll probably have more information to bring you guys on a date, and that is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to see what we can shoot and get some history. That's what I'm about. Is I absolutely love the history of asylums and buildings. You know, the ancient history of things to me is the what's exciting. You know, what was it built for, and what was there before it was an asylum, and you know what's been in there since it's been an asylum, and what kind of people actually were locked up in there, and you know what was it like when it was an asylum, you know. And that's the stuff we're going to bring you. So we got a lot of fun for you guys. So, hey, come back every week and we'll make it worth your while. May God bless you and keep you, and may his face shine upon you in these uncertain times. We'll see you soon.